It's time to review our worst comic book of the week. There were plenty of offerings from Marvel that deserve consideration, but in the end, Amazing Spider-Man number 54 from Zeb Wells, Ed McGuinness, and a few other artists on here definitely takes the cake on this one. I thought the Spider-Goblin story was over last issue. Apparently it was not.
I really haven't read a lot of ASM in the past 40 issues. I think I dropped it around issue 12 or 13, something like that. When you came to me with this one and for worst of the week, I go, oh God, how bad was it? And the answer is really, really bad. What I'm left wondering after reading this comic is how in the hell do they expect Ed McGuinness to go and stick around on Spider-Man and not have this book just kind of hanging over what's going to happen on the new Spider-Man relaunch?
Well, let's get into that art, because that's probably the one thing that you can say about the book that isn't terrible. In fact, there's a couple of pages that look downright great. There's a double splash page with like a spider web breaking up scenes, explaining what makes Peter Parker special. Not that I needed that, but it looks amazing.
It's kind of the very typical montage scene of this is your life from Peter Parker, but they did it really well. I mean, I didn't really need it, but it was still kind of cool. It'd make a not terribly bad, like Spider-Man life story type poster. I'm not a huge fan of necessarily the way Ed McGuinness draws Peter Parker, or rather Spider-Man, but I really like the way he draws Peter Parker's face. But it feels like whenever Ed's on Spider-Man, he's got to restrain himself too much. Ed likes to draw kind of much more hulking, bulky characters. They almost look like really jacked toddlers. But you know what? Fuck it. I still liked it. The art was actually pretty good in this. There was a couple of pages, as you said, that were great, but it was all really good. And you know what? The storytelling in the art, just through the art itself, was actually really well done. The problem was that you added words over top of that.
Like I said, I thought it was over in issue number 53, but right at the beginning, there's like an opening scene with Kraven, but you get into Spider-Man and Norman Osborne, and it turns out it's not over. Spider-Man is still the Green Goblin or the Spider-Goblin, and there's the spear with the Winkler device on the back. And I'm not joking here. This is real. They just start stabbing each other with it and passing the sins back and forth. And at one point, they don't stab each other, but like the spirit of the Green Goblin exits Norman and goes into Peter, and then I think Norman might have slapped the piss out of the Green Goblin spirit, and it exits Peter and goes into Norman. And this goes on for like 12 pages of complete embarrassment. It was so stupid, them passing the sins back and forth.
This was playing hot potato with the Green Goblin sins. 70% of the pages in this book is them playing hot potato, which is not engaging. It is not entertaining. Like the first time it was, oh, okay, it can jump. The second time it was like, oh, okay, it can jump. The third time you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. And then by the fourth time, you're literally just like, oh, I wonder who's going to get it next. I bet it's Peter. Oh, wait, nope. It's got to be the Goblin. It's got to be Norman. I feel like this was just the entire goal of this whole arc was just to finally end the Goblin. Fine, you killed off the Goblin persona.
They're just going to bring it back, so it doesn't matter. And then I guess the only other big thing is because the Green Goblin had taken over Norman and realized it really wanted to be in Peter, and that was his true love. He stole all of Norman's money and gave it to Peter so he could transfer his wealth with him before he took his new house, which is pretty stupid. Why isn't the Goblin persona a part of Norman? It is. It's part of who he is. It's his identity.
Yes, it is a split personality from Norman that was caused by the Goblin serum. It made him go crazy and develop a secondary personality. It's a Jekyll and Hyde thing, for fuck's sake. It's pretty goddamn obvious.
It's not like chlamydia. You can't give it to somebody else.
That's why they had originally planned way back to make the Hobgoblin Norman, because it would be a third persona for Norman. His mental illness is not infectious. It cannot be transferred. Fuck.
The entire time we've got Brainiac, aka the walking brain, kind of witnessing this and like, well, what are you going to do? He's like, it's all according to plan. And eventually the living brain takes the Winkler device and connects to it and becomes a helmet. Norman, wanting to do the right thing because he doesn't have the Goblin persona in him, picks up the Winkler device, puts it on Peter's head to make it into some type of weird helmet that allowed him to confront the Green Goblin on a physical level within his own body and defeat it and overcome it because he's a good person.
It was like a reverse Magneto helmet. The goal of it was to keep the Goblin inside Peter, but then also allow Peter the opportunity to fight it where it can't escape. Yeah, it was in Peter before, and he couldn't fight it. What made you think that it would suddenly start working now? That was the whole
he's got the Winkler device now.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything. That was just a storage mechanism. He still had to beat the Goblin persona. I don't understand what the Living Brain's plan here was. It seemed like the only thing it could do was hold Norman or the Goblin into Spider-Man's head. They did not effectively explain what their goal here was whatsoever with this plan. It was, I'm just going to put a helmet on him. Is it supposed to stay in the storage box? What are they supposed to do with it after? How do you store that? Is it the fucking the goddamn ecto trap things from Ghostbusters? Is that what it is?
But even then it didn't contain it because at the end it tried to escape and then turned into firecrackers before it could reach Norman's body and take a new hose.
I guess Peter finally weakened it enough that it just kind of dissipated into the void, except for it's in the real world. It's a form of energy. Energy can't be created or destroyed. So it's now just gaseous. It'll just end up in somebody else and then eventually transfer back into Norman. And also, when did the Goblin persona become Venom? Because this is Venom's motivation too. You just turned it into the exact same thing where it wants to get back onto Peter.
It was obsessed with Peter. It really wanted to hump his leg.
It really, really did.
I'm tired of Marvel shoving Miss Marvel in this book. At the very opening scene, we get like Kraven choking the shit out of J. Jonah Jameson, and then he's got a knife to somebody else's head because he doesn't want Miss Marvel to interfere because Peter needs to take care of this on his own. And then when all the other stuff is done, we see that Miss Marvel, with the Doc Ock tentacles that she's had on for like 15 minutes, absolutely housed Kraven.
She shows up, she's threatened, and then she apparently easily dispatches Kraven off panel. Holy modern fucking comics, Batman. This is what happens every single time with women in fights. They just easily handle the villain, and you don't even get to see the actual fight.
Does Zeb Wells, because he killed off Miss Marvel earlier on, just like feel compelled or obligated to shoehorn this fucking character into Spider-Man, even though she has nothing to do with anything?
There was exactly zero reason for any of the stuff involving Miss Marvel. Like, those pages literally didn't even need to be there.
She didn't do anything. Kraven wasn't going to go stop him. He was preventing her from doing it. She never saved him. She was just in there randomly doing stuff, but never being a part of the story just because she needed to be there.
Yeah, it feels like they needed 3 extra pages in this, so they just added these 3 or 4 pages of Kamala before and then after she apparently beats the ever-loving shit out of Kraven. This is exactly what they did to Carol. They just keep giving her everyone else's powers and everyone else's stuff in hopes that it actually gets the character over. They gave her Doc Ock tentacles to get her over. They made her a mutant to get her over. They gave her Spider-Man sidekick status in order to get her over. Bitch, you can't get her over.
We also got a lot of jokes in this book. You know, this is supposed to be the big finale of a hard-hitting thing with the big status quo changes. Peter Parker, you know, on the edge of dying or whatever, being taken over by the Green Goblin. And there are just so many ill-timed jokes, and they're not funny. Like Zeb Wells, I don't know how he wrote for Robot Chicken, because he's clearly not good. Like, we had everybody's been tranked up with Kraven darts, so they think they're chairs. And then the wreck rap jokes are the worst. He shouldn't be there. It detracts from the story and even being able to try to take it seriously.
I want to know exactly who likes wreck rap, because I've never heard anyone say a single kind thing about this character. It is the most annoying and stupid and pointless character, honestly, I think I've ever read.
Special needs Spider-Man.
Yeah. He's retard Hulk Spider. There's all these "can you die" jokes. Well, apparently he can't. They can't find a way to kill him. because there's a glider that stabbed him in the heart. Oh, I have more. It's fine.
Are you
It
okay? Not sure. I'm a lamp.
Oh,
Humor belongs in Spider-Man, but you got to know when to lay them out and when they're going to be effective, when you need that moment of levity that's not a distraction from what's going on there, that's going to be additive to it. Zeb Wells has zero comedic timing, especially within comic books. He can't land a fucking joke.
I don't know if Zeb Wells is Canadian. I know that Chip Zdarsky was. When Chip Zdarsky was this bad at humor, I wanted him deported. I think Zeb Wells is actually American, unfortunately, but I want him deported too. His failure to be funny for like 50 some issues of Spider-Man, it's un-American. And
it's a war crime.
It is. And when it's all said and done, after he's done with all of his terrible jokes in here, talking about one character being a lamp, I'm a chair, Rec Rap doing his nonsense and playing hot potato with the Goblin persona for 3/4 of this book, it needs to end.
It was a very, very bad comic book. And I can say this without a shadow of a doubt. This was the worst new comic book release week in the history of my channel. We had to cancel Best of the Week because there was literally nothing to talk about. And Marvel had some really, really bad books. They had one good book in Ultimate Spider-Man, but Black Widow Venomous, this thing, there were some real laughers out there, things that you can't take seriously. And in a week where everything was terrible, ASM 54 really stood out as being extra terrible. And what a waste of Ed McGuinness's art, which is the biggest crime you could commit in comic books. And I'll give this one, oh man, that art is good. I'll give it a 3 out of 10, 1.5 out of 5, because the story does detract from the art.
I'm giving it a 1 because I think Zeb Wells, I think he needs to be shipped to Siberia for how bad of a writer he's demonstrated himself as. Hellions was a fluke. I think we can all now completely accept that. I believe we should get a restraining order that he should not be allowed within, I'd say, 10 miles of Spider-Man for the rest of his life.
Couldn't agree more. If you would like the full review of this, because we did have to edit it down for YouTube, you do need to go over to Think Critical Patreon. But the good news is, if you appreciate what Doc and I are doing here, providing some honesty, some truth to the comic book industry that sorely needs it, you go to Patreon, you back us there. You get the unedited versions of not only these, but you also get the Q&A. You get the Hot or Not podcast with Jim. You get the Geek Fix with Aaron Sparrow every single week, and lots more. Definitely go check that out if you want to support us and our mission here. There's a link in the video description.